log into server automation, you're going to see uh, managed servers. These ones that do not have a pipe next to it are not yet managed. If they have the pipe next to it, they are managed and active. If they are blue and do not have a pipe, they are managed but are not reachable currently by server automation. So perhaps they've been turned off, perhaps there's a firewall issue. There could be a variety of reasons they might be unreachable. SA may think they're still managed, but you actually blew the VM away, and SA just doesn't know yet. Uh, all these ones that are brown are showing up in managed servers because we have virtualization integration, which we also did here. Again, this is our lab in New Jersey, not your lab or your environment, but it looks very similar. In order to do a virtualization integration, you need to have the server that vCenter is actually installed on be managed by server automation. It has to have the management agent on it. And then come over to virtualization, actions, add virtualization service, and it will pause for a second. Select server, and it will show you systems that have a virtualization service on it, either vCenter or the Microsoft Windows for Hyper-V. I'm not actually going to go forward because I don't want to do this again. And then you would give it the credentials that you need to log in. We're using admin credentials here at Safeguard because otherwise SA can't really manage it. And then next, start. Just trust me, it works. It looks cool. I'm going to cancel out of here. And once it has registered, you're going to get a picture something like this, which will show the system that vCenter is installed on, in this case, whatever that host name is, and then your vCenter environment and your individual ESX hosts. So what's on them, what their IP address is, and you'll notice that some of these are showing the blue with a pipe, so they're managed and reachable. Some of them are just showing blue, so they're managed. Some of them are showing the brown, they're not managed yet. I don't necessarily know any of the credentials to these specific systems, so I can't show you that aspect, but you can do, I'm doing this window, right click. If you come back over to devices, SA agent installation, you can give a network range that you want to scan. We'll do all of the 10.10.12 in our lab. And this will go and find all of the systems that are in that subnet as long as it's routable. And we'll print back a report here in a minute or so that will show whether or not the agent is already on them, or if it is manageable, or if the address is even in use. It's running Nmap under the hood. It's kind of cool. Takes it a couple minutes. If I'd been slightly smarter, I would not have picked the entire subnet. I'm just going to cancel. Here? Yes. So, and now we'll show, because I canceled partway in, it's going to show that it found a bunch of IP addresses in use, but it has not yet finished reporting on what they are, whether they're Windows, Cisco, Linux, etc. Unprovisioned servers. This is the section of the device manager where you're going to see systems that have been PXE-gooted against server automation. So they've gotten a DHCP address. Someone has picked which boot environment they're going to use. So this one here, there are several other columns we can turn on, just in case you're interested. This guy here, this one, has already been picked to get a Red Hat Linux 6, what's that, OS, what is that, full columns, x64 installed to it. So it's been pre-booted with that mini root environment. And from here, I'm also not going to go all the way through the steps just because I'm not sure if someone else might be using this. There's two different ways of doing builds in server automation. The old way of doing them is called a OS sequence. The new way is called a build plan. When I was talking to all of you the other day on the whiteboard, I was talking about build plans because that's the method that HP wants you to use going forward. This particular lab environment has been upgraded a couple times, so it still has some of the legacy deployment methods in it. But to deploy, as long as the OS sequence or build plan has been built, you right-click on the unprovisioned server, thusly, select, in this case, run OS sequence, allow you to pick which OS sequence you want to run. I'm not actually going to do that, but we could. And then start. SA does a fair amount of job management, so let me show. Oh, this projector is really shimmering badly. So let me show what this would look like. So I was going to go ahead and run a script against the SA core. The SA core is always going to be a Unix system of some kind. In this case, it's Red Hat. And I'm going to define an ad hoc script. You can either write what SA terms a Unix script, which is a shell script or something you put the hashbang path to interpreter in front of, or you can write a Python script and it will use the agent supplied Python, because the agents are all written in Python.
But if I chose Unix and wanted to use the native Python, let's just say it's a newer version and I wrote mine for, say, a higher version of Python, then I would just pick Unix and then put the hash bang and then the path to my Python.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Just like you would with Perl, Corn Shell, Z Shell, whatever you like to write in, dash.
And
whatever.
just for the sake of this recording, the Python that comes built in is a 2.x.
I want to say it's 2.4. It's like 2.4 or 2.6. But
Okay.
yeah, it is the 2 family.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to do a host name and a uname-a, uptime and a uname-a. Not very exciting, but it doesn't hurt anything. I'm going to go through these one step at a time. Next. You can run as a different user if you have credentials to do that, or you can run as root, again, based on your permissions inside of server automation. All of our users in our lab have everything. It just makes this easier. Now, if there are, and there aren't in this case, but if you have a script that requires arguments, any parameters that it needs, you can put in here, and it just parses it out the same way it would with a normal shell script. If you want to retain script output, you can. You can tell it to retain as much as you want, but it will not retain more than 10K. You can tell it 1,000. It's still only going to retain the last 10 output. It's a field setting inside of the database. I don't make up the rules. I just tell you what they are. So I will go ahead and click next, even though it won't actually keep that. Nope. Back up one. Double clicked. So you can also have a schedule frequency. You can run it daily at a specific time, weekly, on set days at specific times, monthly if you care, or custom, and this follows the standard cron tab setting. So it's going to default to right now. I think that's right now. Yeah, 11th minute, 15th hour. And then it will repeat over and over again. And this is set for the first day of the month, and run every month, every day of the week, whatever that first day is. So anything there that you can think of scheduling normally via cron, you can write a custom schedule here if you like. I'm going to go just once because that's a little more useful at the moment. You can also schedule a once job to happen at a specific time if you want to. I'll just not have it run immediately. If you have mail relay set up, and that is something we will be doing for Safeguard, you can have SA send a message if the job succeeds, if it fails, or when it ends, or any combination of those three. And you can add extra email addresses in there if you want to. Send email to Bob, because Bob just needs extra email. You might also have a notifier that is might be an email inbound notifier for a ticketing system. So you may want to have a ticket ID put in the subject line that is going to add on to a ticket you already have open, presuming, of course, you allow updates via email. Okay, and then I'm going to start it, and we'll look at the output as soon as it finishes. This one should finish fairly quickly, I hope. All right, and here's the output. So it ran uptime, and it ran uname-a, and kicked back everything that it knows about itself. So it's kind of a very simple script run. They can obviously get substantially more complicated. I mentioned device groups when we were on the whiteboard the other day. So there are some device groups in here. If they have this little green circle loop thing, probably got a fancy name for the icon. It's a dynamic device group based on search properties. So I'm going to make a new dynamic device group. I'm going to name it Warren Test. And then I'm going to so I'm going to open it to edit the, this is editing its constraints as to how it's made. So under properties.
So can this group overlap with another one?
Yes. So I'm going to go down to device membership, just kind of look at the short version. And we're looking for servers, because that's all we're managing right now. And there are a variety of fields you can search on. I'm going to search for customer name, and I pick this little button to match exactly. I'm going to pick Opsware. Servers that are owned by the Opsware customer are all part of the server automation infrastructure. So cores, satellites, they're all owned by Opsware. You can also manually assign other servers to belong to the Opsware customer. I did that here at Safeguard with the CSA and OO hosts also, just so they're kind of grouped inside of server automation. And I can do a preview, and this will show me there's two systems that are set to have the customer Opsware. If instead of customer name I wanted to go on, that's an interesting one, operating system, click here, and let's say I want all of my windows, which are down here at the bottom, all windows. Okay, I'm going to preview again. And it'll now show me only the ones that match Windows Prison OS. So you can save this. I will go ahead and save it. You can attach patches directly to this device group. If we have, let's jump, can attach a patch policy if I wanted to this device group. And it's going to filter, it's only going to show things that can attach based on the membership. So if I only had Linux systems in here, you can't have any patch policies because there's no such thing as a Linux patch policy. I'll close that out. Likewise with software policies. I can attach, and if I had one, I can attach test software policy, maybe. If it will let me click on it. Oh, there you go. Or Apache. Now, I can attach a software policy that does not match the platform, but it won't install on systems for whom the platform is not available. I'm going to cancel out of that. And I'm going to close this group down. just for a moment. Oh, we come look at library, because this was something else that we talked a little bit about. Look at audits. Audits are a little complicated. They're really cool, but they have to be built in 2 stages. So I'm going to make a, I'm going to make a new, I'm going to look at Unix audit policies here, and several of these come from HP. If it said modified by Opsware, that's the internal user that uploaded it and they came from HP. If it's modified by somebody else, it's someone else made it. I'm going to make a new one. Call it,
Are all those on your list default? Like the ones that modified by somebody else, does that come with say or
The
just
one-
the ones that says ops?
the ones that say Opsware come from the HP Live Network. The ones that say last modified by were either manually built, like the one I'm about to do here, or they were ones that shipped with that came from HP Live Network, and then somebody modified internally.
Is there a pre-built module for SSAE 16? That's what we use here, right?
Yes.
What is that? I'm not.
It's
It's the old SAS 70.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it's new.
I think there
version of
is.
SAS 70.
So
Said it
No
backwards.
problem. It was just, we can look after.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I'm going to compliance checks. Some of these you just kind of want to. Some of this you're just going to want to piddle around and look at and explore. Let's search for FTP. Pretty sure that's one of the ones that should be in here. All right. So FTP, these are all the platforms that this particular check can be run against. Sun, Red Hat, Oracle, more Red Hat, CentOS. Well, I'm gonna pick this one, just to have one. I'm going to come in here and actually look at it. And what is my check going to be? My check is going to be, I want to know if it's disabled. Right? I'm also going to have a remediation step, which is disable it. If it's enabled, I want you to disable it. There's some description. Not very interesting, kind of obvious. And then the platforms that it's available for, and what is it already a part of? What audits is it a part of, or what audit standards does it meet? So this particular one meets the CIS standard for Red Hat, Red Hat 5, and Solaris. Right. And I'm only going to do one because the others all work pretty much the same. So let me save this. All right. Now, built the audit policy. Now I'm going to come over to audits and back over to Unix again. I'm going to do a new and rules. I'm going to add the policy that I just made, bad services. Okay. And SA is smart enough to name it the same thing of the policy that I added because I only had one. If you add a bunch of them in there, you can rename it as needed. I'm just going with one. And now I'm going to add a target. And I'm going to come through my device groups because I don't want to do them one at a time. I'm going to look at public device groups. And it's really hard to see. This folder or this category here, Opsware, ships with SA. These are unalterable device groups. They are dynamic, but they're unalterable. So I'm going to come in by operating system. And I'm going to say all Linux, add. I want this to run against every Linux machine I have. However, whatever platforms those are, that's what I want to run against. I could have gone down to I only want to run against my Red Hat 6 estate. I only want to run against my Sun 9 estate. I'm just going to pick all Linux because it's quicker. And now I'm going to save it. I'll come
Why
down.
did you hit to save it? Where?
I just did Control S. You can also do
Oh, okay.
file save. Sorry, she said I was doing
No
Control S.
problem.
You can schedule this to run on a typical basis. So maybe you want to run weekly on Sunday at 3 in the afternoon. That sounds cool. Save again. Or I can turn the schedule off, just like with a normal job. And there we go, save again. So now that I've created this audit based on the policy, I'm going to run it. And it has all the targets already as one rule. I can even click on it and look at the rule. Okay. Next. And just like the job earlier, I can schedule, I can notify, and then once I start, I will be able to look at the status here in a moment. This one should run pretty quick, I hope. All right, a bunch of these have failed next to them. 31 of them errored. You'll notice none of them have the little pipe next to them. They were probably servers that were built for something brought into SA in our lab and have since gone away, but SA doesn't know it yet. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to do view results.
While you
Yeah.
mentioned that now and it's fresh in my mind, is there a way that we can run something to detect that and pull a report in server automation to say, hey, you know what, you have these.
You haven't checked in
possibly
a
don't-
week or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually the easiest way of doing that is with a device group.
Okay, great.
Um,
We can go over that later. I don't want to derail you here, but I just wanted to know if it's possible. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to go into view results. And fetch results. And so I'm going to look at the ones that are compliant. Okay, that's cool. Those 4 are compliant. I'll go ahead and highlight those. I can run a partial audit against just those if I wanted to. There's quite a bit that it can do here. Scan failed is the error that I got back, not the service is running and shouldn't have been, but scan failed, which is going to tell me the managed server is marked as unreachable. So it has not checked in a while, and SA has not been able to check in with it either. So again, these are probably systems that were built and then torn down. You can also export. And I'm going to export this right to my desktop. It'll be the easiest place to find it. Export. And that's just a CSV. I don't have Excel installed on this particular system, but it will open with Notepad. And so it'll tell me what, there's a lot of stuff in here. This does render better in Excel, but all the ones that worked, what did it run? There's quite a bit of information actually in here. Oh, or here, it couldn't even read information about the service because it's not even on the system, so therefore it's disabled and compliant. But it will tell you that technically it's an error because it couldn't find it to check. It matches disabled, but technically it is an error. Shrink that guy back down, come over back into SA. So to answer your question about how you'd look for systems that have not checked in a while, so I'm going to edit my group again. And on device membership, so instead of there, I'm going to come up to agent status. It's agent status equals not reachable. All right. I'm going to do a preview. These are all the ones that are not reachable for some reason. Now, it does include ones that are not managed. So you probably want to make this a little bit clearer. Scroll over here. You can add more options. So they have. Let's see if there's a good one here that matches exactly what you're looking for.
What about custom fields?
There are some custom items that you can search against. You can,
Custom attributes.
yeah, so custom attributes can be added to just about anything inside of SA. You can search on the value of a custom attribute. You can search on whether there's a name. There's two different custom. One's called custom attributes. One's called custom fields. But they are they're functionally similar. But you can only build device groups on custom attributes, not custom fields. I don't know why that decision was made. That's not me. But in here is where you kind of play around a little bit with other aspects of the search criteria to really build that device group the way you want it to look. I'm not quite sure which would be the other correct one to use at the moment, but that's where you'd start to find the ones that haven't checked in a while. So let me close this out. I'm not going to save it. Back over to the library for a minute. I showed you audits a moment ago. There are a variety of things and categories that SA has. Application configurations are the configuration markup language that I mentioned when I was on the whiteboard the other day. And there are aspects to that. There are configurations, there are templates that are used, and they are all platform specific. So these are all the platforms for different templates that are allowed. So OS independent, there may be some that can go across platforms. They're not hyper specific. You may also have some that are for Windows 2008 R2 x64 only. I'll find a good example of one to show you. OS independent. So let's look at that's just a default kickstart. That doesn't have a lot of interesting content in it. So there are a bunch of things that go into a template. This is what CML looks like. It's a little funky. Actually, it's a lot funky. There is a reference in the SA manuals as to how to do CML, and there are a bunch of examples on HP Live Network. So not going to go too in-depth here. I also have not personally used it a lot. I haven't had a huge reason to, but it is in there. Coming back over in the library, let me go up and kind of shrink down this section. Build plans, some of these ship with SA. Let's see if I can find a good one. I'll show you what that looks like.
Can it look deeper into the system, like the BIOS? So say, like, oftentimes we have, with this generation of servers, some particular setting that needs to be set on every one of them in order for it to work correctly. Can it interact with the operating system to write to the BIOS? As far as
Hypothetically, the SA is managing at the OS level. The agent is OS level specific. So if there's something that you can send to the system to run that would up, if you want to flash the BIOS, for example, you want to do something like that, if you can run it normally from a command line like as root or as administrator, then yes. But it's not going to directly interface with ILO.
So is there any tools, did we buy any tools that could do that kind of check for us? Because it's kind of a, it's a problem, it's like every system gets racked. Sometimes, they're repurposed, they were configured for, hyper-threading. Hyper-threading's turned on, now we want to re-provision it for something else, and it should not have hyper-threading.
I am not sure what else you may have. I know that SA does not do that directly, at least. I'm gonna hopefully that answers your question,
Yes.
even if it's not quite what you wanted to hear.
No,
So this is a simplified build plan. This kind of goes along with what I was saying the other day, the overall steps. The first thing it's going to do is mount media. It's going to configure this kickstart, which is actually the content of the kickstart. That's what that configure script is doing. This script actually pushes the kickstart down to the system that's being imaged. Then another script kicks off the build, finish the OS, reboot, monitor the entire thing, install the agent, and lastly reboot again just for good measure. Make sure everything is actually set and it survives reboot. If you wanted to add extra steps, and this is where I'd had on the board the other day, you can have some optional additional steps. You might have attach a software policy here that you want to put in at the end. And because you're attaching a software policy, you also want to remediate that software policy out to the system. That has to happen after the agent is installed, because otherwise it doesn't know what to do with it. But so if you select add attach software policy, it's going to put a remediate server step in at the end, because otherwise there's no point attaching it. You can manually pull that off if you only want to attach the policy and not remediate it. I don't know why you would, but if you wanted to, you could do that. I remember this guy.
Why would anyone do that instead of just leaving the remediate? Is there a reason why that would? Or should we just stick to,
No, I could see a case for that if you do, you're doing a bunch of builds, maybe Mondays and Tuesdays are your build days, but you don't actually you're not going to hand these systems over to end users until the following week. So you want to build everything today and tomorrow. Wednesday, you're going to come in and look at it, make sure everything's copacetic. And then Thursday and Friday, you actually push all your software out. I could see that. It seems to make more sense to me that if you're going to attach the software to it, because that's part of the build, why not just do it all at once? 6 of one, half a dozen the other. You end up with the same end result. So the only real difference is, does it match your internal policies and procedures? And SA is fairly flexible. It, hopefully you update some of your policies and and come around to some of your internal procedures that kind of reflect automating. But SA is going to be fairly flexible and allow you to do things the way more or less the way you have done them, just sort of SA-ified or entirely new methods. So
another question, I guess, specific to this environment. Our dev environment and our production environment are isolated. So they would actually have to run their own instance. Is there any way to keep this data that's in SA synced between the two?
Depending on how isolated, there's a tool that ships with SA called CBT. It's the content baseline tool, and it will export content from one SA environment, and then you can import it into another one. So you can do that if you're completely isolated.
We're VP. I guess one system is VPN into the other one.
Okay. I have seen some environments where they'll have SA calls it a multi-master mesh when you have more than one SA core installed, and you may have one environment that's sitting in your production environment, one that's sitting in dev, and you have different permissions and people are allowed to see different things based on what they log into. but there the content is synced across the entire environment all at once. But if you log in with your production username, you don't see dev content. If you log in with your dev username, you don't see production content. So there's a couple ways of going about that. That may be a really good discussion for a phase 2 project, but we haven't quite gotten that far yet with your environment. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. The other items are kind of self-explanatory. Packages is where you view what is in the library. Same with patch. Most of these things are basically virtual views into the library. The library is actually structured by folder, which is technically also really just another view into the library. So there are items that sit at /. This is the one I just made. All these items ultimately are referenced inside the database and sit as objects on the file system. Audits only sit inside the database, but if it's an actual package, for example, if I go into RHN and I look at packages and I pick, this doesn't matter which platform I pick, I'll pick this one. This is version 6 for 64-bit, x86 64. So all of these packages do sit as objects on the file system ultimately, and they are copied down that way, but they do not sit on the file system labeled, 389-bs-base-libs-1.2.11. whatever. They live as internally uniquely identified object numbers. So there's no real mapping between package name and file name outside of SA. So it would not do you any good to just go in and download object 419.741.001. That's not going to mean anything to anyone except SA. That being said, this is the RHN channel that we have, one of the 2 channels that we import, and you'll notice we have multiple versions of, for example, this Quagga package. I'm not sure exactly what all the different version informations mean, but it looks like we have version 15.5.01, 02, and 15.7.3.2. So let me go up a level. These are the packages. Channels will actually have, this is the policy that applies the packages out. And you'll see in this software policy will be all of the items in the channel. And every time the RHN import tool runs, it updates the channel policy to have the most recent items in it for each version. And if we come in and look at this particular RPM, it's install only if earlier is there. There is no auto update turned on for it. This is the default of how the RHN import tool works. It sets it up to only install if it's already there. Basically upgrade only. Because the last thing you really want is for however many items that is. I want to say it's a couple thousand at least. I go all the way in, find out. Right. Almost 5,000. The last thing you really want is for 5,000 packages to be deployed to every server, especially since some of them will stomp on each other. So, but when this is run, when this is attached to a server and run, it only updates based on what's already there. You can also
So
make
how would you do a life cycle, where you wanted to deploy, patches to an OS, to the dev
based
OSs,
on today versus
and let it cook in for a month and then apply it to QA.
right. So what you do is, let me come back out of here. This is the one that RHN import makes.
Right.
To select correctly. You'd copy it because it's just a view. So if you copy it here, then you paste, and we're going to call this one, in just a second, when it finishes copying.
Like Q1 2014, for example.
Exactly. So, let's say you have origin import running, get some of the network issues squared away that we've been seeing. You have it run every week, right? You have it run Saturday night every week. And periodically you go in and you make a snapshot of that. Basically, it's what I just did. I copied it, right? So this one now will never update unless I update it. So this one is, it is whatever that was when I copied it. I can go in and make changes to this policy. Like I don't want 5,000 items in it. I want to find, there's KDE in there. I don't even care about KDE. I want to remove everything KDE related. So let's come down. It's a lot of items. I'm going to yank them, right? I did not pull them out of the library. The packages are all still in the library. This is just a policy. Basically, it's a bunch of pointers to the actual locations. But now, instead of having 5,000 items, hopefully, I have 4,700 now. So I removed a couple hundred items. Right? Maybe I don't care about X11. Maybe I don't care about a lot of stuff that's in here. So you can pull them out.
But if you pull them out and they're needed for something,
You could end up with a problem, yes. So it probably really is better to have them all in there and just say, all right, the channel that was made on the 1st of January is the one we're going with.
that's
In 3 months, we're going to try the next one, or in 1 month.
probably the
Or,
way that we're gonna avoid this.
Is there any way to automate those snapshots? Because currently Mike wrote a really great script that does basically this, but automatically. And it's actually very cool. Can this automatically make those snapshots? Like on a
Not
schedule or something like that?
that I know of.
Okay.
It may be possible.
Mhm.
I don't know that I've ever run across that exact use case of wanting to automate it happening every 1st of the month, for example. Usually most admins want a little bit more control, even if it is just right-click copy, right-click paste.
Mhm.
They want to have that little bit of hand-holding opportunity and not have it just magic itself.
Yeah, I don't want to get way off subject, but what we have now actually is actually, it does give you that control, but also automates some stuff too. It doesn't clobber stuff completely. It actually, it lets you phase it in, like Mike was saying, but I don't want to get off subject. I apologize. So
No,
go
that's
ahead.
okay.
Mhm.
I like good questions. So obviously there's a lot more in the library. I'm just showing you a few items. And there are yet more options, especially if you get into Windows aspects. You can manage Windows services, registry, IIS, ComPlus. There's a lot of things that SA will do. Honestly, some of it is stuff I have not had a reason to get into, so I'm going to kind of skim over those. Look at some of the reports that do come with SA. I mentioned the other day in the whiteboard session that there's about 12. It looks like I was off by a little bit. 2, 4, there's 8. There used to be a few more. So these are the basic ones, very, very basic. So servers by customer. You can filter, or you can just run. There's not that many servers in our lab environment, so this shouldn't take too long to run. 40%. So, and it's just a listing of all the systems with the OS that's on it, if it has a customer, the facility that it's in, and some mistake. And it is only the ones that are managed. It is not going to include the unmanaged systems that may be in the virtualization environment, because SA is not managing them. It shows them as manageable, but it's not going to report that they are managed when they're not managed. I'm going to go over to job history. So I can check out anything that has a recurring schedule. I can see if anybody has any active global shell sessions. They don't. And then job logs. I'm just going to look at the last 24 hours. There are other periods you can look at. You can filter by status of the job, type of job. I'm just going to look at all of them. So let's look at, I can come back in and look at this job here that I just ran a few minutes ago, and it will show me the status, and I can go back and look at it again. Depending on the type of job, information is stored in SA for 30, 60, or 90 days. Most things do start to age out at the quarter mark, but you can go back in and find a lot of things after the fact. Sort of some, not necessarily forensic analysis, but some historical digging that you can do. And then administration. Again, in our lab, all of us have all permissions. So these are aspects of the environment that we can change. These are the customers that are set up for us. Facilities, we only have one core in our lab. Every core and every satellite gets its own facility name. It's the terminology it derives because SA was originally built for a hosting company. So I can do some reports on the environment, which is way more interesting if you have more than one core. You can look at, if you have more than one core, SA calls it a multi-master mesh, and you can see how many transactions are going across the mesh in close to real-time, real-ish time, and you can see if you're having any problems. We have one core that you should never have problems with one core. God help you if you ever do. That's not cool. Usually it means there's database issues. And then you can look and see if there are individual conflicts. And a conflict is the term that SA uses if a transaction initiated on one core has not made it across to another one. That could happen if two people are trying to make a change to a server at the same time and it doesn't know which is the right one to go with, or if something was down in between two environments and you made some changes here, then found out, oh crud, our internet was down in the second data center, so there's 3 hours worth of transactions that haven't made it across. Transactions are pretty small, but there may be some data that hasn't made it across, and when the core comes back up, maybe you were making changes in the other data center while I was making changes here. We didn't know that they weren't connected. With only one core, you're not going to see that. SA fortunately is smarter than that. This really is only going to show up if you have a multi-sided environment. Some of these are not very interesting to look at. I can't see user admin. That's unfortunate. So I'll skip over most of the rest of that. The other thing that I had mentioned when we were whiteboarding was the tool called the Global Shell. So I'm going to load that. And so this is the bash environment fuse module that is the view into the database and view into your environment. And the big directory, if you use the global shell that you'll really like playing with, is /opsw. Sidebar, you also notice this number that will increment every time I type a command. That is not just a blank line. It is my job history. Everything that I type in here that is echoed to the screen is logged by SA. So that's going to increment every time I do something. If it's a capital letter, you can CD into that level, and it's a filter on the environment. Basically, it's a search. If it's a lowercase letter, if it starts with a lowercase letter, it is something. It's something that SA is exposing at that current level about itself. So I'm going to go into customer. Do a -L. So I have 5 different customers in here. I don't really care about most of them. So let's say I want to look at just the OpsWorks customer because that's where my cores and satellites are. In this case, just the one core. When you get to the end of a filter There's no place deeper to go at that level. You get an @ sign because nobody uses @ signs as directories except Server Nation. So now I'm at, if I do a PWD, I'm at Opsware customer Opsware. So these are these systems. This is going to be the systems and everything about that customer. Most of this information is read only. Some of it is editable. There's some stuff in here that I find periodically that I didn't even know was in there. If I cd into method, so this is again a lowercase directory. These are all things that I can run their effectively operations, their views into the API that allow me to do something at this level, whatever that level is that I'm at. So I'm not going to remove because that badly breaks an environment if you remove Opsware. So it's going to go up a level. Now, let's say that I want to go into, or I want to look at info. So I'm going to cat info. And this is everything that SA is willing to tell me about the customer Opsware. It has a display name, it has a name, it has an ID. Some of these values are really pretty much only going to be useful if you get into some deep support cases with HP, but it does expose quite a bit about the environment and how it relates to itself. I'm going to cd into server, and so I have two systems at this level. One of them is labeled SA Core 01. That one's the far more interesting one. So I'm going to cd into that, and I'm still inside the global shell, but I'm getting one step closer to technically being on the target system. So this is kind of cool. I can cat self again, and it gives me a little bit of information. It gives me my host name. I can cat info. Again, it gives me some information about it. It's going to tell me these last 4 digits in an ID are the core or facility that something belongs to. The digits in front of that are its device ID or its object ID inside of SA. So the core is always the first object, and by default, your first facility number is always 1. So your core is always 10,001, and everything increases linearly after that. SA does not reuse object names ever. If you blow away a system, re-import it, it will get a new object ID. But it will tell me a few things about it. It will tell me it's running Red Hat 5 x86 64. It'll tell me that it's on it is a VM. The serial number of the VM as reported back. The agent version, code set that it's running, the default gateway. This is some of the networking information. Its IP. So a variety of things about itself that it will tell me if I cat that info file. So now I'm going to go into files, and I hope I have the right permissions to do this. All right, so these are the users that I am allowed to connect as inside of SA, inside the global shell, to a target system. My user has permission to connect as root or administrator or myself. So I'm going to cd into root, and I'm now sort of on the target system. If I cd into temp, I can touch a file. It actually is put on the system, but it's sort of going through one step delayed. I'm running this command that is being checked against whether or not it's allowed to be run, then issued out to the agent. The agent does the work. It comes back, and then it actually has happened. It is very cool. But something that's even a little bit cooler than that, I'm going to come back up because I really don't want to make any mistakes on this particular system and goof up the file system. That's just not cool. The remote Opsware shell, or ROSH. I'm actually going to come up one more level. So remote Opsware shell works just like SSH on the command line. -L for login. I'm allowed to log in as root. -N, your server name. You don't want the trailing slash. And it has to be the server name as SA knows it to be. Sometimes that's short name, sometimes it's long name, sometimes it's all caps, sometimes it's all lowercase, sometimes it's a mix. It's however the system has reported to SA that it is called. Windows a lot of times will report all caps on the server name, but the domain is all lowercase. I don't know why. It's just however it reports. Solaris reports funny. So It's however it is known inside of SA. I can run a command here. I'm just going to run up to me. How about uptime instead? And it's going to take that command, package it up, hand it off to the agent, run it, and then spit the results back out. Or sorry, you can do a for loop, for I in splat, standard bash, expansion, do. Maybe you want to run uptime against everything. You could do that here. Or I can take this command off the end, and notice that right now it says W Myers at SA Core 01, and I got that funny number on the end. I'm in the global shell right now. And now I'm not. Now I'm actually on the server. Effectively, an SSH session, it's actually running over SSL, but it is a full shell session as the user, presuming you're allowed to log on as that user to the target system.
Are all your inputs still audited and checked, or is it
Yes.
now like
Anything that is echoed to the screen is still logged in SA, but my number, the number of commands that I've entered inside the global shell is going to stop incrementing because I'm basically in a subshell.
Yep.
So this is exactly the same way that when you run a command, it ends up going to the agent. It spawns a subshell, runs everything in the script that you're running, and then reports it all back and captures the output. So it is the same thing, it's just on the command line. So this is, Linux, and I can type, who am I? I'm root, I really am. I'm on the system. Nope, TOPP is not. I'm on the system. I can look at stuff. I can do anything that I would normally do if I was root, but everything that I'm running is being captured. Some things look really, really ugly in the audit logs because it's effectively like running script. So all the raw control sequences that actually format stuff on the screen are also captured. So some things are really hard to go through, but it is all captured. It's all there.
So it looks like pretty much like a putty log. I don't know if you've ever seen putty logs, but
they're
kind of messy. Okay.
Yeah. So again, this was going through customer opsware and then the end of opsware. So now I'm going to go back through because I know we have some Windows servers. It will only, when I'm in this directory here, which is server at OS, it will only show me systems that I actually have under active management. So it won't let me try to go down and search for AIX 7.1 machines if I don't have any. It's only going to show me ones in this view that I have. So if I do an ls-l at this level, I'm going to cd into that W1. And now I'm going to cd the at because I want to stop filtering at this point. Okay. So I'm going to Rosh into this guy. Yes. Hopefully this will actually let me do it. If I can spell administrator, that would be even better. Once it finishes logging in, and I now have a PowerShell console. And I am on that system, ready to execute PowerShell. So I think the global shell is probably the single coolest thing that SA can do, but I'm a nerd. So let me get back out before I do something dangerous because I don't know if that system's actually being used for me. That was most of what I wanted to cover. Do you have other questions?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
So let's just say that I want to rapidly deploy a huge number of nodes. Can this tool help me do that? For example, let's just say on January 2nd, I have to deploy 100 nodes. How can I do that quickly, like as quickly as possible with this tool?
Right. So
Like, can I batch stuff is basically what I'm asking. Or something along those lines.
sort of.
Okay, great. Let me know.
So with, I'm going to come over here for a minute. So I'm going to come into devices and under unprovisioned servers. So presuming that you have Pixie booted systems and they have come up with the correct pre-boot environment. So we're gonna make that presumption for a moment that they have come up with your Linux 6 pre-boot environment or your WinPE boot environment, whichever one you're provisioning. You're on the Unix team, so you're going to be doing Linux boxes, I'm sure. But there are probably some folks that will be doing Windows machines.
Definitely, yeah.
As many of these items that are in the list as are in the list, that are unprovisioned and have this little, it looks kind of like an empty server with a pipe. Trust me, it does. The icon's a little hard to see. You can right click on as many of these as you want at once that you want to deploy Red Hat 6x8, 6.4x86 out to, or 60x64 out to. You right click on, you select 12 of them, right click, deploy OS build plan, next, go. And then it will do all of the builds at once.
Okay, that's nice.
If you have parameterized your Kickstart, which I started to do with Keith earlier this week before he got ill, there are aspects, if you will open up Mr. Server, you can put custom attributes on here and these ones, you'll see we have 4 in our lab on this system. These are custom attributes. These are actually basically key value pairs. They get replaced in the Kickstart. Anything that was in between a double @ symbol. So inside the Kickstart, there will be a field labeled @nameserver @. And when SA sees that, it comes up and looks to see if there's a custom attribute. And if there is, it puts in that value. If there's not, it puts in whatever you have defaulted. So if you have @nameserver : 10, if you do not give it a custom attribute, it will go with 10. If you give it a custom attribute name, like @nameserver , and you do not fill it in, it will error because it has nothing to fill in. So it does rely on you to be slightly intelligent, but as long as you're slightly intelligent, it can take over and be really intelligent. If you leave something off, it just looks at you and goes, I don't know.
Is that same mechanism? Is that same mechanism used in the unattended on the Windows side?
Yes, custom attributes are almost universally accessed regardless of how and where they're used. They can show up in scripts also. They can show up all over the place inside of SA. I will point you guys at all of the manuals also because there are lots of manuals. You probably don't actually want to read all of them because your mind will go numb reading them.
Speaking of,
Maybe you like reading manuals. I don't know. At about 3,500 pages, my eyes start to glaze over. So, but I will make sure that you have access to all of those. But this is where you would do that. You'd have custom attributes attached to the system. These you make manually, so that there is a little bit of manual intervention. You can add another one, and you give it a name, and you give it a value. They are random in the perspective of SA does not care what you call it because it is custom. They're not random in the regard of it has to match what's in the Kickstart of the unattend. If you called it nameserver, except you actually had namesever because you typoed it, it will not match. It is case sensitive. So that being aware, I just need to give you all of the caveats. That being said, as long as you filled these things out, and I think we have about 4 or 5 parameters right now in your Kickstart. As long as you filled them out, SA fills them in for you, and you find out at the end of the build that, well, out of these 23 that I kicked off, 20 of them succeeded and 3 of them failed. Why did 3 fail? And you can go back and look and see, they didn't really, somebody forgot to give me enough storage or whatever. So SA will report back on that to you, but the idea is that you build as many of them as you want at once. SA handles throttling the number of jobs going out so that it may not actually technically be building 50 of them at the same time. It might only be doing 20 because something else is running. But you kick them all off and you go get some coffee or have a donut or whatever your thing is.
Right.
A coffee and whoa,
Yeah,
look out, coffee
I know,
and donut on.
I know.
So all those attributes start off as blank
They start off
values?
with none. There are none
Right.
in here by default. I'm gonna yank that one back.
Well,
off.
so it's inherited from the.
If there is a
so-
higher level that has them, they are inherited down.
Yeah.
If they have, you might have a custom attribute at a facility level. In our case, it's STI Lab, but at a facility level, I think in your case it's SGP, CMH, or something like that. That is name server, or you might have one that is media server or something else, so that you don't have to put that on every system.
So
And
something global, for example, like name server that Windows and Linux nodes are sharing in common would be at that level, and then the stuff that's like more specific would be down in the lower level.
right, and you're going to have things like server IP. Well, obviously that's going to be different per system.
Is
That
there
needs
a
to be
way
added
of,
per system.
of sort of automatically assigning something like that? Like, I'm just imagining you have 100 servers. Can you just tell it, well, in increment, go through and give it?
So that's where the managed boot clients comes in. And let's see if this runs correctly. And in just a minute, I'm going to show you SAV also, because that's kind of cool. Not as cool as Global Shell. But kind of cool.
Global shell is pretty awesome, actually.
It is very awesome. It presumes, though, that you do know what you're doing, just like Unix does, except it's Unix presumption taken to your entire environment. So I just have to give the caveat. What you choose to do with that information is not up to me, but I have to tell you. So you can actually pre-populate what these systems are going to be coming in as. You can pre-populate some. You can do a multiple client form instead of a single client form. So I'm going to go back to the individual client form. It's a little bit cleaner. So if you know the MAC address, you can fill that in. You can tell it, that's the only thing that's actually required. You can tell it, though, hey, this thing is going to go to not assigned, or it's going to go to, I'm going to want to have this not go to my main facility. I want it to go into my facility that's actually in, I don't know, Arizona, right? If you had one. You guys don't yet. But if you did, you could set that up. And I'll just say, that looks like 6. Next, because maybe you don't know what DHCP address it's going to get. But then you can also decide, am I going to want to build this with a build plan or an OS sequence? We're going to go with build plan because that's all we're setting up for you guys right now, because it's the way forward. And what kind of build plan is it going to get? Is it going to get Linux 6 x64, Linux 6 32-bit, Windows PE 32-bit, or Windows PE 64-bit? So you pick that, and then when the system actually boots, it will show up in the unprovisioned server pool, where we were looking earlier, and it will have some of these things pre-built. You can even pre-assign it which build you want it to use, which is kind of spiffy. Next,
And it'll just start doing it then at that point once you. You still have
if
to
you need to
initiate-
add custom attributes, you can add them here. So you might want to set everything except for server IP, maybe that you have to do manually. But you can add a name and a value, and a name and a value, and a name and a value. We're going to remove some. Let's call it, I don't know. Right. So we'll say that's there. And then start. It should actually, it may technically give me some errors in a minute. But what it's going to do, when this finishes, it will now be waiting, and you can close this out. It's waiting for that MAC address to appear in its unprovisioned server pool. And when it does, it's going to do what you told it to. If you did not pick a build plan you want it to use, it will stop and just be ready to go. So you can automate more. I mean, there is still some manual intervention because you do have to enter some of this stuff by hand. But once you have, you just kick the systems off, and as long as you know the MAC
So I
address.
saw an option for CSV entry. So you could, if you had the max all your systems, you could
You
create
can
CSV
you can mass enter them, yeah.
with all that stuff.
And
put it
that
in there.
more details are available in some of the manuals that I'll send you guys later on today.
That would be great. And that CSV definitely look cool.
So, so right now, so here this guy has finished. He's now waiting for this MAC address, which is all zeros, which of course doesn't really exist. And if I come over here, he's now waiting, right? So he doesn't have an IP address yet. He has a faux IP address, just like this one below him that was set up for that particular MAC address. But he's waiting, and when that system does register, it'll be ready to go. So that's kind of cool, I think. All right. Any other questions on sort of the OS provisioning before I move over to the last thing I wanted to show you? Okay. All right. So I'm going to come back over to all managed servers. I'm going to look at this guy because he's just one system. And I'll right-click on a server and open with the HP Service Automation Visualizer. And we're going to hope we don't get any Java errors. Yes. This sometimes takes a little while, and I probably should have kicked it off a few minutes ago. So the visualizer, or SAV, does something really neat. It goes out, it talks to the managed server on the agent, and finds out what's running on it and brings that back to you in a visual representation of the applications running on it. Now, this really starts to show off its power if you have, say, a multi-tiered application. If you have the database for SA installed on one machine and you have SA installed on another, and you have, maybe you have two satellite facilities. You have one in Pittsburgh and you have another one in Charleston, West Virginia, let's say. You can select all four of those systems because you have the database, the core, and two satellites. And when you do a view with, when you do a right click on all four of those at once, open with the visualizer, it's going to show you a visual picture of how those systems talk to each other. What ports are going where, who's talking on what. The only drawback, like I said, is that sometimes it takes a little while to run. But
Would
it does
that
give
possibly help you analyze failures? Like, for example, if something's not working right, would that help you in a graphical way kind of analyze these
it
problems?
absolutely can. That was part of why it was written, was to be able to look at complex business applications
Mhm.
in a schematic format
Right.
and sort of help show you, oh, well, your problem is nothing is listening on your MySQL server. Oops.
Or it's bound to loop back instead of all adapters. You know?
Right, you know, something to that effect. So yeah, that's really where this will shine. We're at 16%. That's pretty good. I am having it run a slightly more complex scan just to show off a little bit more of the power of it. So
I certainly want to see it finish, so don't cancel it.
oh, I won't cancel. I was more just wondering if there were other questions I can answer about something you've seen that I can answer while this is loading.
Do we have an unattend setup?
Do we have, no. I have, once it errors out on the, get build manager IP and build manager port, comes up with a graphical interface that asks me for the IP address and the port. Hit OK, it goes up and goes into tail for 132 and says server is now ready for provisioning. So, it's getting
No, I mean like an unattend.xml file, like a Windows version of Kickstart.
do we have one yet? No, I haven't been able to. He gave me a sample one, but I haven't been able to modify any of it yet.
So this is what a visualizer, well, flashing there, my mouse was lit up over something. This is what a visualized view of a server looks like, and this is what SA actually looks like from a schematic point of view. There are the little pipes that are connected. You can see what's connected from and to. It looks up processes running, gateways. That's what SA calls it. What ports are they listening on? What ports are they connected to? This is what a visualization looks like. It's a virtualization.
Can you hit one of the objects in there just to see what kind of additional details you can see about it when you get in there?
Some you can.
Yeah,
So some of it's also going to open up over here in this tree view.
okay.
So there's all kinds of information that's found out. Open files. This guy here, right click on him. If you want to do things to it, I don't want to break SA, so I'm not going to do any of these particular tasks. But if I wanted to run a script against part of an application set that's been visualized, I can run a script against that server from here because it's all SA. Or open a remote terminal against it. And this will actually kick off a global shell session right to that system from the visualizer. Close out. So that's kind of something cool.
So if you were to connect to one of those and do something that actually changed the way the schematic was laid out,
You can-
would it update automatically, or would you have to read?
It's a refresh. I'm find that. It's this button here, refresh snapshot. So this is a snapshot view of what's on there. One other thing I did want to show you out of SA that I had neglected. Let me come back over to server automation. I'm going to pull up. Well, I'll pull up this server. Maybe. Okay. So properties. I can see some information about it. Custom attributes that have been tacked onto there. I can see a history. What's been done to this thing in the last quarter? Or what has it done in the last quarter? I can look at management policies. I can see what audits have been attached to it. What software policies are attached. And look at a compliance view. Let's do determine compliance to display. So this is on a per system basis. It will show me that I've attached some policies to it that are out of compliance. Now, whether these 46 or 45 items are actually bad probably doesn't matter. They were developed for testing and we're just showing off what it will do. But I can look at a compliance on an individual system. I can look at a relationship. I can see what groups it's in, what public groups it's in. I can see, I'll show some of those. Come down and look at inventory. It'll actually show you quite a bit about the system that is very close to live. Network information, server location if it knows, disk information, virtualization information, files. I'm going to connect as root. And this is actually a graphical way of getting the same thing I did on the global shell. I can upload a file and it will show up on that server, all via SA's security model. I can look at services that are running. This is basically a graphical representation of check config. And I can make changes once that little pulse bar quits. I can make changes that will actually show up when I do a refresh. I'm not going to make any, but I could. Look at registered software, presuming it runs correctly. So these are all of the RPMs that it knows about. So there's a lot. Get down in here a little ways, and there's a bunch from the start. OPSW, those are all RPMs that were installed for the core itself. It's 590 total packages installed that it knows about by querying RPM. Look at the runtime state. And this looks similar for Windows machines, just obviously Windowsified instead of Linuxified. So I can see what has been set up and a lot of things that are, this was current as of when it just ran. So as of about 45 seconds ago, all this information was accurate. Because it actually got this straight from the agent, including a process tree, it's effectively a PSOX, network information, users that are logged in right now, and who are they? Apparently Root's just logged in a bunch of times. Probably showing stuff off like I'm doing right now. Uptime in seconds, just in case you're feeling adventurous and want to do some math. Bytes of memory, because heaven forbid we measure in K or M's. These are actual bytes of memory. How much is free? Again, this was all current as of about a minute and a half ago. And I can look up each of these things in a little more, if there is more detail, it will show me some more. Going in a little deeper. If there, sometimes there's stuff it can go under. Let's say I want to look at process, I don't know, 18. It'll tell me what that's doing. What files does that process have open? What packages are associated with it? So it's kind of cool. And I can also look up all of the users and groups that are on a target system. Apparently Gopher is on there. That's kind of cool.
Isn't that dead?
I guess there's a reason they call it Whack-A-Mole and not Whack-A-Gopher. They haven't killed them all yet. So yeah, those are actual configured users on that system and configured groups. And go in a little deeper and look at the games group. Is there any users attached to it? Let's look at Gopher. Doesn't look like there's much attached to Gopher. Look at users in tree view. Gopher's shell is no login. So I'm not really sure why that's in there.
It's a service account.
Yeah. So probably because nobody ever pulled it off. So that's some of the extra stuff that you can find out, like I said, in a live or near live state. There are some things that RPM now allows you to roll back, and if it has an RPM rollback point, it will tell you what that is. I'm not really going to do that, so I'm going to cancel because I don't want to roll back. I don't know what that is, but I don't want to. No. Under the virtualization tab, because the ESX host that this is sitting on is managed by vCenter, and because the vCenter host is managed by SA, it tells me a bunch of information about where this VM is actually located in terms of your vCenter infrastructure.
And the VMware tools is out of date.
Yep. I'll also tell you that this VM was made outside of SA. So if I come back over here, go down, I think it's under virtualization. So I want to create a VM. Right click, and you go through your steps. So where do I want it to be located? What do I want its name to be? Some gobbledygook there. Let's put it on, we'll just put it there in DevLab. That sounds like a good spot to put it. Next. Gig of RAM, 1 CPU. Neat, I can install OS 10 onto it. Anything that VMware lists as a supported platform, this will show. You can install NetWare 5. Look out. Let's say I want it to be a Red Hat 6 box. So now it's going to tell me, do I have enough storage for it? What storage do I have? I'll put it on this one. Why not? That sounds good. Storage configuration. I had a hard disk. 20 gigs, that sounds good. Network, that sounds useful. Which network do I want to put on? I'll put on 10.10.10. Why not? Sounds fun. If you make the VM inside of SA, you can also know exactly what MAC address you're going to get for the managed boot clients. So you can sort of force that to work in your favor if you wanted to. You know, don't stomp on somebody else's MAC address space, maybe, but.
Is there a nice hook to script this out?
I don't know that I've ever looked for it, so there may be. Power on boot delay. You want to have power on delay? Next. What build plan do I want to use? So I want to use this one.
So you can set the build plan there.
What boot image am I going to use? Well, I'll use that one. Do I need any custom attributes? So whatever that build plan is going to be looking for, I can add those here. So not do that. Next. And then it will give me a preview before I actually go and do this. I'm not going to do it because I don't know what the capacity in our I don't know what the capacity in our lab is, and I'm not familiar with which network I really should be on. We've added and moved things around recently, or I can schedule it. I could create 100 of these things today and schedule them all to happen on the 3rd of January.
One day too late.
Do I want my notifications? What's my job status? I have not started the job. I'm not going to. But you can do all that from, it's almost a single pane of glass. It's at least a single interface. Other questions, comments?
I have no
Cheers.
additional questions. Anyone else?
No.
All right.
That was really helpful. I would really appreciate you giving us that video.
Yeah, I am going to stop recording, and I will get this sent over to you.